Thank you all for joining us tonight and for taking the time out to learn about monarchs. So my name's Nicole Newell, and I'm one of the program managers for Sustainable Solano. So we are located in Solano County, which is part of the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And our mission is to nurture initiatives for the good of the whole. So you can learn more about all our programs by checking out our website and through our email newsletter. And so also thank you so much for your donations for today's class. This allows us to expand our offerings to the community. So the Sustainable Backyard program that I manage aims to introduce the concept and practice of permaculture to Solano County. So we install demonstration food forest gardens based on permaculture principles through educational classes that are free and open to the public. So tonight, Annina is one of our speakers this evening, and she has a demonstration food forest garden through one of our programs. So she initially wanted a sustainable garden because of her passion for pollinators, and she just has a love and passion for all pollinators. So the basic format for this evening, I'm going to introduce Ann Whittemore from the Monarch Milkweed Project, and then Joanna Schroll, a past Monarch docent from Pismo Beach, will give a presentation on monarchs, and then we'll hear from Annina with a call to action on what we can do to help preserve monarchs habitat. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So we recommend that you view this evening in speaker view so you can get a clear view of the presentation. So Sustainable Solano also manages 2 community gardens in Benicia, and this is where I met Anne. She reached out to us with the interest in growing milkweed and pollinator plants. So the Monarch Milkweed Project is now caring for 2 garden beds at Swenson Garden in Benicia. And in fact, this morning I was at Swenson Garden and I saw a monarch that had just emerged from a chrysalis. So it was just pretty magical and synchronistic since we're having this talk tonight. So thank you, Anne, Annina, Joanna, and just all the volunteers working to support monarchs in their habitat. Now I'm going to give the floor over to Anne so she can tell us more about the Monarch Milkweed Project and the awesome things that they're doing. Thank you, Anne. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicole. I am just really excited to be here tonight, and I really want to thank you, Nicole, and the whole team at Sustainable Solano for hosting us tonight, and also for the ongoing support and encouragement that you've given us so far in the garden and in the other ideas that we've had of ways we can partner together, and all the things you've offered and are offering to continue with as our organization grows. I also want to thank all the participants that are here tonight. Thank you for being here to learn more about the Monarch and the Monarch Milkweed Project. I'm Ann Whittemore. The Monarch Milkweed Project started as a group on Nextdoor when Annina put a post saying, hey, Environmental Defenders Fund is doing great work with monarchs and pollinators, donate here. And I was like, yeah, that's important. So I sent her a message and I was like, hey, Annina, we should start a group. And she was like, that's a great idea. And so here we are. We started a group on Nextdoor, and we just had so much immediate interest and support. It's happening really quickly. We're growing. We already have 148 members as of this evening in our Nextdoor group, mostly from Benicia, some from the larger Solano County area, and a couple even more far-flung. Someone from Jacksonville asked this morning to join, or maybe asked yesterday and just joined. So it's people can find us on Nextdoor, but also through our website, monarchmilkweedproject.org. So we have that large membership in our group, and then we have our dedicated group, our core group of volunteers who help with things like tending the community garden at Swenson, or giving presentations as Joanna is doing with us this evening, or helping pick milkweed plants, or help post things to our website. So we've got a great group of core people, and as we grow, we are always looking for more. Anybody's welcome to join our group on Nextdoor or volunteer for some of the things that we're working on. I think that's some of the reason for all the interest in, besides who doesn't love monarchs, but also we're just in a time where we're constantly faced with, bad news, especially about climate change and the environment, and it can be really overwhelming trying to think of what you can actually do about it. And this is something that is so simple and fun and easy, and it truly makes a huge difference in saving the monarchs and helping with the whole pollinator ecosystem. So to that effort, Monarch Milkweed Project is framing our action areas around 3 areas: plant, participate, and promote. By plant, of course, we mean plant milkweed and pollinators. Milkweed is the only plant that monarchs can lay their eggs on, and it's the only plant that the caterpillars can eat. The loss of habitat in the form of milkweed is one of the largest driving forces in the reduced population of the monarch. And pollinators provide nectar for the adult monarchs. So they're also an important part of what's. By participate, we mean advocating for the well-being of monarchs and pollinators. Tell your friends and families and teachers and children to plant milkweed, and ask your local nursery to not carry tropical milkweed. Sign petitions, call your lawmakers, ask Home Depot and Lowe's not to carry plants with nicotinoids, or not sell Roundup. Just get involved. And again, we have a specific call to action for you that Annina will tell you about in a little bit. By promote, we mean educate, learn all we can, and teach others about the issues and solutions for the monarch. Just share knowledge, which is what we are here for tonight. And with that, I will introduce Johanna Schroll, who has graciously offered to share a presentation with us tonight, in spite of a recent case of laryngitis. She's a trooper. Joanna is a former docent at Pismo Beach Monarch Grove. She's a monarch counter and a master gardener with Contra Costa County. She has a really fascinating presentation for us tonight. And Johanna, we're very grateful for you for presenting this tonight. And I'll turn it over to her now. And I'm going to share my screen because I'm running the slides. So thank you very much. Here comes the slides.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Joanna Schroll. I'm a former docent at the Pismo Monarch Grove down in Central California. I worked there from 2014 to 2017, and I also participate in the Xerces Society count. I have counted 2014 to 2020. So tonight we're just going to have an overview of the monarch life cycle, the migration, and the dramatic decline in the population. Next. Female monarchs lay anywhere between 200 and 400 eggs on only milkweed. Of those eggs, only 1 to 5% actually survive to develop into an adult monarch. The eggs generally hatch in about 3 to 5 days. Next. The caterpillar eats the milkweed voraciously and will increase its weight by 2,500 times in a matter of only 15 days. Milkweed contains a toxic cardiac glycinogen, which the caterpillar consumes and stores ultimately to make it poisonous to its predators as an adult. The caterpillar will shed its outer skin 4 times. Next. The 5th instar stage, the caterpillar is about approximately 2 inches long. The caterpillar would then look for a location to attach to go into the J position, which indicates the start of the Chrysalis phase. Next. Metamorphosis takes approximately 9 to 15 days. The monarchy closes and pumps fluid from the abdomen to fill out the wings. It will stay in this location for about 4 hours to allow the wings to dry, and then it will fly to look for nutrition and nectar plants. There are 5 generations of monarchs in one given year. The first 4 generations live approximately 6 to 8 weeks. The fifth generation, often called the super generation, are the overwintering monarchs. And they're the ones that live 6 to 7 months and are the ones that hunker down in the coastal regions for the winter. Next. There are actually two groups of monarchs in the United States. The eastern monarch travel from the Canadian border to Mexico with a small group that go to Florida. They're known as the slackers because they don't want to fly so far. The western monarchs travel from anywhere from Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Utah, and they go to overwinter along the central and southern California coast. The Rocky Mountains are the divide of the two different groups. Next. These are some numbers that look overwhelming, but this is put out by the Xerces Society, which is actually the official organization that tracks the numbers of monarchs every year. There is approximately 350 known sites in California. Just a few of them close to us. One is Natural Bridges in Santa Cruz. In 1997, they had approximately 120,000 monarchs. In 2020, they had 500. Pacific Grove by Monterey. In 1997, they had 45,000 monarchs. In 2020, they had 0. Where I come from, down in Pismo Beach, in 1997, we had 100,000 monarchs. And in 2020, we had less than 200. Next. And just more of the same. These just list all of the sites for the Xerces Society. Next. This is from the Pismo website. You can see the numbers here. In 2016, we had 28,000, and in 2019, we had just over 3,000. Next. So when you look at the numbers, it's a 86% drop from 2017 to 18, and a 99.4% drop from the 1980s. For every 160 monarchs that there were in the 1980s, there is only one left today. Next. This is just another chart to kind of raise your awareness to the dramatic decline. I think this shows just how devastating it really is. And this is just from 2016 to current. And you can see that literally we have just dropped off the charts to almost 0, which is pretty devastating. Next. Counting monarchs. People often ask me, how in the world do you count monarchs? It's easier than you may think. We obviously don't count one by one. The Xerces Society actually contacts local groups that are known to have counters, and they assign us to sites in our area. We generally go out with a partner and go out in the early morning, like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, when it's too cold for the monarchs to fly. And so we can actually get a really good count of the clusters. Next. So this is a cluster of monarchs. Next. So as I said, we don't count each one individually. We actually estimate a size of maybe 10 to 20 monarchs given the size of the entire cluster. And then we count in small sections that way. So we're counting by 10s or counting by 20s. Next. So here's an example of how we would count that cluster there. We try to see all sides of the clusters because obviously it's a 3-dimensional figure, but sometimes you aren't able to do that, you know, if it's in an area in the wilderness where, you know, there's a lot of brush around or even streams or what have you. Sometimes we can't get to all of the places. In that case, we'll just fudge the numbers a little bit, you know, estimating, okay, well, we'll increase our number by maybe 1/3, given the fact that we can't see X amount of, you know, this area. Next. So what happened? Well, monarchs get sick and are preyed upon. We have had a severe change in our climate, and we have the use of pesticides like Roundup. And we also have the loss of monarch habitat. And over the last several years, we've had these horrendous fires throughout California, obviously affecting their habitat. Next. So natural causes for monarchs are diseases and parasites. The purple looking chrysalis there that you see is an example of a tichnid fly. It's a parasitoid that lays its eggs inside the chrysalis for the larva to feed on, thus killing the chrysalis. And then we have below here the protozoan OE, which causes malformation of the adult wings and such. And that is why we're always concerned about the tropical milkweed. Tropical milkweed is linked mostly to the development of OE because it doesn't die back in the winter. Next. Another problem is natural disaster, something we can't control. It occurs and there's not a lot we can do about it. One example was that there was a massive decline in 1998, and it's referred to as the crash of 1998. A late spring storm hit the West Coast and literally wiped out a number of monarchs just as they were preparing to leave their overwintering sites. So here you had all this mating that had gone on. The females were full of eggs, and the storm comes in and just literally kills a large number of them. So what happened was the first generation wasn't there. There were no monarchs to lay the eggs. And so they really never recovered from that. In 1998, at the beginning of the year before the storm, the Xerxes count was 1.2 million. And then the following year, after the storm and the cycle through the year, the official count was only 60,000. So it was projected that 50% of them got wiped out during that year, and they just never recovered. Next. They also have predators, not a lot. It's kind of great because the caterpillar eats that milkweed and gets the poison in it, and then that poison is transferred through the metamorphosis phase to the adult monarch. But they do have some predators. If a monarch gets stuck on the ground with wing damage or some other ailment, obviously it can be taken out by rodents and things of that nature. Also, fire ants tend to be a problem. There's very few birds that actually bother them because of the poisonous effect. It makes birds violently ill. And through whatever method their color presents to the bird, don't eat me, I'm poisonous. And the birds stay away from them. There's only a couple of birds that can stomach the poison, and one of those is the black-beak oriole, and the other is the black-headed grosbeak. And I don't know of any of those locally. Somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong. Next. Pesticides are a real problem. It's killing the native milkweed, it's killing native nectar plants, it's destroying their habitat. Roundup is used in agriculture as well as in home gardens. And as a good neighbor, the best thing we can do is go to the nurseries and research what you're using on your plants and use things that are as natural as possible, that don't have those really harmful chemicals in them. Next. And again, habitat loss. We've got urban development going on. We've got the drought. We've got the fires. Down in Mexico, there's illegal logging going on, and all of that is destroying the overwintering sites. When I was down in the Central Coast, so much of the property down there that was just wild is now vineyards. As far as the eye can see, vineyards everywhere. And again, spraying of pesticides and all that kind of stuff. It's really devastating. Some of the vineyards, there's one that's up in Annina. Can you help me on that? What is your favorite vineyard?
Jordan.
Jordan, and where are they?
I'm sorry, what about Jordan?
Where are they located?
They are up in, they're in Sonoma.
Thank you.
Sonoma County, yeah.
So I was really impressed that Jordan Winery announced earlier this year that they were going to donate like 800 acres, I think it was, to Monarch Habitat. And they were going to plant milkweed and nectar plants, and it's like, great, hopefully people will catch on. I mean, you think of all the farmers out there and the wineries and stuff, just take a little bit of your property to help the cause. It's, not that big a deal, and you're doing something for good, Next. I kind of threw this in just because a lot of people don't know that this is done. It's the tagging of monarchs. Currently, that has been banned, and you cannot do it without a license. But in the past, it's been used as a way to track their locations and track how many miles they've traveled. And it's a really good thing for scientists to know, just to kind of get to know their paths and that sort of thing. Next. So what can we do? Well, pretty simple. We can just make waste stations in our own yards, our neighbors' yards, spread the word. Everybody likes flowers in their yards. It's really simple. You plant some native milkweed, you plant some pollinator plants, and all of a sudden you become part of the migratory path. Next. So plant milkweed. We would prefer that you do plant native milkweed. It will die back naturally in the winter when the climate gets cold. And tropical milkweed tends to grow throughout the year, and that is something that we don't want. So if you find yourself with tropical milkweed, we ask that you cut it back to the ground in November or December and let it re-sprout with new growth in the spring. And that is a way to prevent the development of the OE that is devastating for the monarchs. Next. And this is just a list of nectar plants that you can use in your garden. There's a whole lot of them. Salvia and lantana are some of my favorites that seem to attract the adults. Shasta daisies, violets, yarrow, zinnia, etc. Go ahead, next. So what can we do? We can become citizen scientists. We have a lot of great online resources now that we didn't have before for reporting sightings of monarchs. And they actually add the information that you send them to their database. One of the ones that I've used several times is iNaturalist. And you can go onto their website and they'll ask you to take a picture of a monarch, and they'll ask you, what the date was, what the time was, what the location was, etc. And they'll log that into their data, and it's just good information. The more information we get, the better. But all of these other ones are great too. Next. And these are some of my personal photos from what I call the good old days. This was when I was down working in the Grove. I never was without my camera, because there was always an opportunity to get some pretty fabulous photographs. Next. These are some nice clusters, and cypress tree next. And some close up, the nice sun coming in and warming them up, and then all of a sudden they'll fly and take off, and you'll get a huge burst of monarch flying all over around the grove. Next. And then we have the X-rated version, 2 monarchs mating, and they'll do their little dance, and if the female accepts his offer, he will take her and bring her up into the trees, where they will go to the honeymoon suite and stay for approximately 24 hours while they mate. And then they will part ways, and she will go off and find another mate. Next. Up backwards. Next. This I put in here because it was kind of interesting regarding the tagging. This was a monarch that was recovered in 2020 down in Pismo. And on the tag, it says that this female was tagged in Utah on August 31st. And it flew 603 miles on a 5-month journey to get to Pismo Beach. Next. So in closing, what can we do to help? We can plant milkweed and nectar plants, create monarch waste stations, avoid harmful pesticides, and spread the word. Next. And this is just an example of how many organizations we have. This is just a few of organizations that we have throughout the United States that are all on this same goal or journey that we are to help preserve the monarch butterflies. So thank you for your time. I hope you learned something from this presentation. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Annina Puccio for her call to action.
Hi, everyone. This is Annina Puccio, and I am going to share with you today a call to action that you can do to above and beyond just planting milkweed and not using pesticides. There is further action that we need to take in order to help save and propagate monarch butterflies. But first, fun fact, did you know that a flock of monarchs is called a kaleidoscope? You might want to know that for future reference. Anyway, last year, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service agreed that the monarch butterfly needed protection, but they've decided not to put them on the environmental endangered species list until 2024, which will be way too late for the monarchs. If you remember what Johanna was saying, there are some overwintering sites that don't even have any monarchs right now. Like Monterey, I think it was, Johanna said it had 0 last year. 2024 is too late. The overwintering count was less than 2,000 monarchs last year. So if you go out to our website, I'm going to tell you a really important call to action, but our website is monarchmilkweedproject.org. You can see our calls to action, and one of them is to get a hold of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and demand they be put on the environmental protection list. But the most important thing that we want to point out to you right now is there are 2 acts that are going through Congress, 2 bills that are in committee right now, the Monarch Act and the Monarch Pollinators and Highways Act. The Monarch Act is, it's technically the Monarch Action, Recovery, and Conservation of Habitat Act. And that's going through the committees right now, and hopefully will be brought to the floor later this year. you can call your congressperson and say that you support these acts and that you want them passed. And these acts will provide millions of dollars a year to not only help save the monarch, but to plant pollinating plants and native milkweeds along public highways and byways all over the West Coast. These are specifically for the Western monarch. And they will also provide funds to organizations to get out the word and to get people to plant milkweed and native plants in their gardens, to help organizations have community gardens like ours in Benicia, et cetera. So we want to get those acts passed. In the Senate, they also have the Monarch Act. So again, you can call your Senate reps, Dianne Feinstein and Alex Padilla, if you're from California, and you can ask them to pass these acts. All the information for this, including we've written a script. We've put their phone numbers there. We've written a script. You don't even have to come up with your own words if you don't want to. We also have their email addresses. Nicole is going to post or Allison is going to post their email addresses. If you would prefer to write an email, that's fine too. But the important thing is, please, please, please it'll just take a few minutes, and they're very nice. Just call, please, or email and ask them to pass these. It's very, very important, before it's too late and we lose these iconic insects. We don't want to lose them. And on that note, I will pass it back to Anne, I guess. So thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Annina. That was very well expressed. I think that where we are now is the Q&A portion, and Nicole will be moderating that. So, Nicole, to you.
Hello. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for the awesome presentation and call to action. So now that we know that the pattern of the migration season seems to be changing, and we know we don't want to cause disruption to these, wonderful, beautiful monarchs with our good intentions in planting milkweed, when should we cut down our plants to ensure that the monarchs move on to the overwintering grounds?
Given the climate change, we are realizing that as late as December, we're still seeing monarchs floating around. And typically down in Pismo, they start arriving in October all the way through the end of December. So from my perspective, I would say late November, early December would be the very latest to cut down the tropical milkweed.
Should we be cutting down the regular milkweed as well? Or
I believe so. I could be wrong, but I think that just not having it available is a signal to them to head south, and that's what we're trying to do. Unfortunately, because there are so many people planting milkweed now, and it is lasting through the winter because we're not getting those harsh winter freezes, etc. We're finding that we're having a lot of populations that are just staying in place instead of doing the migration. And so that's a whole new phenomenon that has become something over the past 2 years that we're noticing. Even in San Francisco, resident populations, in Berkeley, resident populations. So, things are changing, and until it's studied for a while, we're not really going to know what that indicates.
Yeah, So actually, a follow-up on this one is Diane Allen's asking, how do you tell the difference between tropical and native milkweed? So milkweed is spreading in her yard and dies back in winter on its own. And so what did you say about cutting back the tropical one and let it grow back in the spring?
So we want to cut back the tropical for sure, down to the ground, and it will come back in the spring.
Is there a way of telling the difference between the
I
tropical?
would suggest that she just go online and Google tropical milkweed images, and she can look at what she has compared to the images that she Googles. It's not something easy to describe because, you know, it does look kind of like narrow leaf, but yet it doesn't, sort of thing.
Yeah. And then when's the best time to plant the seeds, the milkweed seeds?
So I've been successful planting seeds in the winter indoors in the moss pots, you know, that disintegrate when you stick them into the ground. I'll just sort of keep them in a location where they're somewhat warm and water them and stuff. And so then by the time I'm ready to plant in early spring, they're a decent size. But then at the same time, you can just put the seeds in the winter, and then they will, you know, get that freeze a little bit to crack the outer shells, you know, to make them sprout, and then they'll come up in the spring as well.
And then we just had someone put in the chat that narrow and leaf and showy milkweed, both native, have light pink and white flowers, and the tropical milkweed has the orange and red flowers.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And then let me just see, there was another one here. So Family Jewels milkweed, which is my favorite.
Yeah.
Coming up all over my yard. We have someone asking if that's a good milkweed species to plant in Vallejo, and if I think it is, that's a native one, so
Yeah.
that's not okay.
Yeah, it's very prolific.
It's very
And the seed pods just blow everywhere. So if you're not worried about milkweed coming up everywhere in your yard, it's a great one. But if you are wanting to have a little more control of the milkweed, that might not be one that you want to plant, because you will end up with milkweed all over the place.
Yeah,
It is a weed, remember.
I got Family Jewels everywhere.
Yes.
But I also have monarch caterpillars everywhere,
Yes,
as
yes.
well. Let me see if we're missing any questions. Okay, so there was somebody wanted some clarification on the tagging of the milkweed. Like, how is the tagging banned, or how does it affect the monarchs?
It's actually a simple little sticker, like something that you would get at the stationery store. And it just has a little tiny bit of adhesive on it. It is printed with the information of the location, the date, and it has a number of that particular monarch on it, and an email or a phone number to get in contact with the person that put it on. It does not harm them at all. They usually will do it when the monarch has just about fully dried out its wings, and they will take a pair of tweezers and literally just stick it onto one of the wings, and it doesn't harm them at all. It doesn't affect their flight, anything.
Okay, that's good to know. And then I have somebody, so the caterpillars are eating all my Family Jewels plant, and that's what they're supposed to be doing, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's what we want them to.
The hardier, the better.
That's right.
Interestingly enough, that the monarch's adult size is determined by the size of the caterpillar. So if you end up with a caterpillar who has devoured a milkweed plant and is kind of on the small size because he doesn't have any milkweed left, that's going to produce a smaller adult. If you get some of those gigantic ones that have, you know, just a lot of milkweed available, and they're just going to eat and eat and eat and eat, and they're nice and plump, those are going to be the monarchs that are larger in size.
Those are what we affectionately refer to as the chonkers.
Exactly, exactly. Because we would have people come to our grove and they would say, gosh, the monarchs just don't look as big as they used to as when I remember as a kid, or, you know, whatever. And ultimately, you know, that's the reason. They just didn't have the availability of the milkweed in that particular area that their egg was laid.
Well, That's why we have to keep planting it. So we've got a little bit of confusion about the tropical. So aren't we not supposed to have it at all? So why cut it back to grow again?
Well, as I said before, if you have it, this is what you would do if you choose to keep it. My suggestion is get rid of it, because now nurseries are providing us with natural milkweed. Before, in years past, they would get the tropical in, I think, because it was easier for them to get. And that's kind of how it got distributed and sold. But today, there's really no reason to have tropical, seriously. All of the nurseries in the Bay Area are just chock full of native milkweed, and that's really the route to go, in my opinion.
Real quick, I would like to add something, Joanna. If you are going to go to the nurseries in around, make sure that you ask and they're not spraying with pesticides that are going to harm the caterpillars. There are some nurseries that spray with pesticides, and you have to keep the plants inside for months, which really doesn't do you any good. So ask about that. And also too is most of the nurseries can also help you pick out native pollinating plants that the monarchs would love. So be sure to ask about those too. Don't just plant milkweed, plant nectar plants too.
Right. As soon as those adults close, you know, they're looking for food. They're pretty ravenous to feed on nectar. And so yeah, pollinator plants in close proximity is really good.
So there's a question about milkweed planted in Benicia's community garden, and that's a yes. We've got milkweed planted at the Swenson Community Garden currently, and I think we're going to be planting some at the Avant Garden with the Monarch Milkweed Project. So we do have that. And then someone was asking for family jewels, to get the family jewels milkweed. If you live in Benicia, I would suggest connecting with the Monarch Milkweed Project, because we're going to have seeds. I've got it coming. I live in Benicia and I have it coming up all over my yard. And so I've been given instructions to collect all those seeds so we can pass them on and get them, because I think that's the best way to grow it, is from seeds, and you're not having to worry about the whole pesticide spraying. So yes, we're going to have that. And then there's another question about, with various microclimates in Solano County, where in the county should we be planting milkweed? And is all of Solano County part of the breeding range? For example, this person's in Vacaville.
Yes, I don't think there's any specific route that they take. They are all over. They're just looking for that milkweed. So it's, you know, if you plant it, they will come. They do like a sunny location, and generally speaking, once they're established, they don't need much watering or anything. They pretty much maintain themselves, so really easy to grow.
Easy to grow. And I also saw hummingbirds on my family jewels milkweed.
Okay, good.
So I saw, so it wasn't just for the monarchs.
Right.
And ladybugs too. Also some orange aphids, but I just smushed those guys with my.
And bees like the milkweed too.
Yeah, so a variety of pollinators.
Sorry about that, guys.
So then Sarah's asking, I keep seeing that milkweed should not be planted within 5 miles of overwintering sites or
Absolutely.
in general. How important is that?
Very important. 5 miles from the overwintering site. And again, it's because we don't want to keep them in that one location to end up being residents. We want them to have to leave the overwintering site to go find the milkweed and continue their journey north.
Can I just clarify one thing that touches on that, and also about the tropical milkweed? I mean, we think that there are two issues with the tropical milkweed, and the first one applies to any kind of milkweed. If it doesn't die back in the winter, it doesn't encourage the monarchs to move on to their overwintering sites. They just hang out. They continue to live on these plants. They lay their eggs. They get very sickly offspring late in the season. They don't migrate out. So that's one of the reasons to not have milkweed of any kind in your garden after early December.
Mhm.
And then secondly is the parasite. I might argue that one is even more important. The parasite, if the plant is allowed to continue to grow and never gets cut down, that protozoan continues to grow. And the plant gets more and more covered with it, and the butterfly lands on it, picks it up on its wings, sheds it to the next plant when it lays eggs. Then the baby caterpillar eats that and becomes infected. And then those caterpillars will be unhealthy. They may not be able to make the migration. They may not be able to fly at all. So that's the thing about tropical milkweed, but it really applies to all milkweed. The parasite and the migration, we just don't want them available in the winter. It's a Western monarch problem because in the Midwest, the weather kills them.
Exactly.
But here, it's allowed to proliferate. So I hope that
Right.
clears up, because I see a lot of questions in the chat about, this type.
Right.
I'm just going to add the tropical milkweed that is called Asclepias curassavica. That is the undesirable milkweed. And if you are having trouble differentiating at a nursery, just read that tag. Curassavica is the kind you don't want.
And just we will be sending some resources, and the Monarch Milkweed Project will be writing a blog in our newsletter to clarify with some of these questions. So a lot of these are good ones, and I know that more people have them, and we want to not do more harm to the monarch. We want to keep learning and keep doing a little bit better. So then we have a question from Robert Peters. I missed this one, but I went back, and it says that he has a large Calypso lantana plant, yet not many butterflies stop by, and it doesn't seem to be interesting to butterflies. He read somewhere that you can put some fine grain sand nearby to encourage them to engage the lantana more. Is that correct?
I don't know that question or answer, sorry.
Okay. Let's see if there's. Okay, so it's what happens to them from the gosh, I think we're going to just have to do a tropical milkweed question in the blog, that we can kind of thoroughly answer these, because I'm a little confused. Are there any questions that I didn't get to? If you could put it in the chat, we have a few more minutes. If there's something that I'm not seeing in the chat.
I could answer. There's one in there. Judy and Sharon ask, what's bad about resident monarchs?
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
And that's such a great question, because nothing. Intrinsically, resident monarchs are better than no monarchs by a long shot, but we don't want to affect and disrupt their normal, healthy, regular patterns of migration.
Yeah, and then there's this one is too, where it's she's asking, why do so few eggs survive? So I noticed that too, right? Like, so you see all these eggs. I saw a monarch lay a ton of eggs, and then I went back and didn't see any caterpillars from them. So
right, they can be eaten by other insects.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do ants eat them?
Pardon me?
Do ants eat the eggs?
Yeah.
And then another question, and this might be something we could add into the blog. I know you had a really nice slide that had some of the good nectar plants for Solano County. So if you could just name maybe your top 5 that, top 5.
Salvia was one that I spoke of that I've had a lot of success with for adults. Lantana, but this other gentleman apparently didn't have good luck with that. Yarrow, zinnia, Shasta daisies are just a few that come to mind.
Yeah, we could maybe.
I was just going to jump in here. And when Sustainable Solano put in my wonderful permagarden out front, the pollinating plants, I've got salvia and I've got yarrow, and they just absolutely love it. Any kind of native plant that will grow here in Benicia, they absolutely love, and it grows really, really well. But I would highly recommend those.
Yes, and actually this is a good question for you. There's Dana Lee's asking how to encourage the city not to spray pesticides. I think this was, so do you have any recommendations on?
Yes, we are working with different organizations, through different organizations, to stop pesticide use. And one of the things on my list is to talk to the city of Benicia. We want to stop Roundup. One of the things I'm very upset about, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but Roundup, it now comes with 3 times the amount of glyphosates in it. They've actually intensified it, and we would love it if you guys would demand that Home Depot and Lowe's stop selling Roundup. And I definitely we are, as an organization, we are working to stop pesticide use all around, because it's bad for the environment, it's bad for us, and it's bad for pollinators.
So I will be sending out an email on Monday with resources, and I believe there's someone here by the name of Sarah McKibben that is going to have a resource on where to purchase milkweed. And so I will put that in the email to everybody that registered this evening once we get that information. So I think with that being said, if there's questions that we didn't get to, we'll definitely try to within the blog. And thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you, Annina and Joanna and Anne and Allison behind the scenes for all the awesome information. And now we'll just keep planting the milkweed and keep doing it in a way that is going to be beneficial to these beautiful butterflies. And if you're in Benicia, you can email me and I'll get you some family jewel milkweed seeds.
We are going to have a little seed exchange, and I'll put that for your blog too.
Perfect. So when you do the seed exchange, I'll be happy to bring by some of the family jewel milkweed. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.